Hi, everybody. We're going to continue the series on codependency. And this week and next week, I'll be doing the two lectures based on the inner child work. I would make a recommendation to you because I'm going to go through a lot of stuff with you today to get ready to do inner child work. So if you have a pen and a notepad and a pen, it would be good. You might want to take some of this stuff down as I go through it, okay? All right. I'm going to begin by doing the reading. I picked the reading from The Language of Letting Go, the daily meditation book for codependency. And I picked the reading from August the 8th. Saying yes. Yesterday in the reading, we talked about how to say no. Today, let's discuss another important word, yes. We can learn to say yes to things that feel good, to what we want for ourselves and others. We can learn to say yes to fun, yes to meetings, to calling a friend, asking for help. We can learn to say yes to healthy relationships, to people and activities that are good for us. We can learn to say yes to ourselves, what we want and need, our instincts, and the leading of our higher power. We can learn to say yes when it feels right to help someone. We can learn to say yes to our feelings. We can learn to identify when we need to take a walk, take a nap, have our back rubbed, or buy ourselves flowers. We can learn to say yes to work that is right for us. We can learn to say yes to all that will nurture and nourish us. We can learn to say yes to the best life and love, the best life and love have to offer. Today, I will say yes to all that feels good and right. I wanted to read that today because what I want to do in this particular talk today is kind of do a preparation talk for the inner child workshop next week. And also just to let you know about next week in doing the inner child, I'll probably be staying on for close to an hour with you because it takes a little bit more work. But I think it's really important to be able to do the prep work to get ready for doing this. Remember I said back in the beginning, there are 6 stages to recovery from codependency. And the last stage of recovery is being able to get in touch with and to be able to meet our inner child. So as we get ready for that, we give you some ways in which you can do that. One of the things I'd recommend that you do, if you want to, is find a photograph of yourself as a little girl or a little boy. Basically something that is connected between ages 0 and 10. And something that really talks to you. Secondly, I recommend that you get 2 copybooks. One is we're going to work on the journaling process and do the inner child work. So one copybook, you can go to the $1.25 store and get them. The one copybook is going to be your negative copybook. The other one's going to be your positive copybook. Because one of the principles I'll talk about today is doing our history and getting in touch with our inner child is not about finding out what's wrong. It's about learning how to heal, how to make peace, how to build a real sense of ourselves on the inside. Also, I recommend something I recommend to a lot of people. We have a nickname for what we call a God box. A God box is nothing but elaborate. My God box at home is a shoebox, with a slit in the top, almost like a bank. And I'll talk more about that later on today and how we're going to use all these things. And I recommend these because I do recommend that these are some of the tools and things that we use in doing inner child work. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about how do we put these things into practice, what do we do with them, and how do we begin to develop a good sense of who we are and what we're really all about. I said this back in the beginning when we started the series. I said that the foundation of everything in our life is usually developed in us in the first 10 years of our life. Most psychiatrists and most psychologists normally say things are developed in the first 7 years of your life. I'm nice, I give you a 10. But the bottom line is, we don't realize patterns, behaviors, things that occurred during that time. So what I recommend, you take a few minutes and do a short inventory of your childhood. And what I did was I put together 7 questions that would help you to do that inventory. Now, if you want a copy of these questions, you can go to the website startingpoint.org, click on Vince's Corner, which is my YouTube channel, scroll down to the bottom where it says alternate resources, and you'll see one of them that says the Codependency 7 questions. What the 7 questions mean is take some time just to think back to when you were a little child and begin to maybe write a little bit about your history and your background. The first question is, what is your perception of your parents as a child? And I use the word perception for a reason. Whether you realize it or not, all of our perceptions are different. I told you this before. I could take 7 brothers and sisters from the same family, put them in 7 separate rooms, do a family history, and come out with 7 different families. Because every child perceives the family differently. So just think back. And again, don't get crazy, don't get elaborate. Just think back, say a prayer, whatever comes out, comes out. What was your perception of your parents, your mom, your dad, the connection? What was your perception in the second question of your grandparents on both sides? Did you have a relationship with them? I know in my own life, I never met my grandparents. My grandparents died before I was born. I heard stories about them, plenty of stories, but I never really met them. In fact, my grandfather in Italy, whom I'm named after, Vincent, the only photograph I have of him, he's standing in the middle of about 100 chickens. He was an egg farmer. Just amazing back in Italy. And so it's the only photograph I have of my granddad. So basically we talk about your parents, about your grandparents, about your family history. Now, when we mention your parents, that could also, for some people, that could be step-parents. Or in some circumstances, that could be an institution. For example, if somebody was adopted, they not only have their real parents, they may not even know them, they also have other people who help raise them. All these things have an effect on you as you go through this process. The third question is, what is your perception of your childhood, your neighborhood, your cultural, and your environment? For example, what type of a neighborhood did you grow up in? What kind of a cultural background? I can mention some names and you probably would pick it up. I grew up in South Camden. I lived in Camden, I told you before, back in the 40s and 50s. And I lived in an all-Italian neighborhood. And back then in Camden, every neighborhood was defined. The German neighborhood, the Polish neighborhood, the African-American neighborhood, the Spanish neighborhood, the Irish neighborhood, the German, everybody had their own church, their own connection, their own little spot. And the bottom line was, things were different back then. So the concept is, in my early years, my culture had a lot to do with traits and characteristics and things I picked up in the course of my journey in life. What about your neighborhood, your culture, your environment? How did it affect you? What ways? For some people, it could have been very traumatic. It could have been very devastating. It could be a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. There could be a mixture of both. The fourth question is, what was your perception of your religious upbringing? I shared this before. I'm sure when I was 1 month old, I didn't say to my parents, please baptize me Catholic. My parents took me, placed me into their belief system. As a result, then, it kind of became mine for a period of time. But over time, things change. Life changes. It's part of the process we go through in life. We look in recovery today, we talk about the God of our understanding, whatever works for us, whatever we're connected to. And what's so beautiful about that is many of us, in growing up, were taught certain things in certain directions. I look at myself from the 40s in the Catholic, the Catholic grammar school, where I had nothing but nuns. And I joked with you before about that. I think the nuns I had in grammar school were trained by the Marines. They were tough. They were tough. And later on in life, as I did my work, I began to realize maybe I learned something from them, even though they scared the hell out of me back then as a kid. So we look at different things in life in different directions in life. What was your perception of your childhood peers? How did you get along with other kids? What kind of an effect did that have on you? In some circumstances, that can even be traumatic. It's a scary process in life. Okay, so again, a lot of us may have experienced stuff with our kids growing up. You've heard the old phrase that kids are tough on kids. The sixth question is, what is your perception of yourself? How did you see yourself as a child? I remember in growing up, I saw myself as a lonely, scared little boy, overwhelmed by so much around me, and not being able to truly express my feelings, and being told what I'm supposed to do and how to do it. And so I didn't really have a good sense of myself as a kid. And then the last question, how did your childhood that you experienced affect you later on in life and relationships? See, again, all these questions are geared primarily towards helping you to do an overview or a history of the first areas. Yeah, gotta get it out. Of the first 10 years of your life. And it's just interesting how you pick up patterns and traits. From my mother, I picked up my addictive personality. My mother had a prescription drug problem. She was addicted to amphetamines. My mother had a lot of control issues. My father was Mr. Wonderful, Mr. Codependent. Everybody loved him. He was the family hero. Later on, I took his place. But it's crazy. We don't even realize sometimes some of the behaviors we picked up, and even though we did them. And we'll get into this a lot more when I do the inner child thing tomorrow. I wanted to share those questions with you because I really believe they will give you an overview of yourself, an overview of the concept of the inner child. See, whether you realize it or not, deep down inside of every one of us, we have what I call a wounded child. Each one of us in growing up. Now, I don't know about you, but I know about me. I have yet to, every family has some sort of dysfunctionality. Now, if you come and tell me you found the perfect family, please call me so I can take them on tour. They don't exist. We all have our humanness. We all have our idiosyncrasies. We have our stuff. We bring our history with us no matter where we go. And so my parents brought their history with them. My father brought his history from the old country. And as a result, a lot of our behaviors and things that occur happen because of history. In part of our Italian tradition, they delegated one of the kids to be either the family clergyman or the family nun. Since I was the only kid, I got the short straw. I got the clergy. But again, back then, my parents put me into the seminary when I was 14 years old. Thank God they don't do that anymore. The world was different back then. We also learned after a period of time that little kids should be seen and not heard. So mind your own business, grin and bear it, and get through it the best way you can. It's just amazing, because I realize now, my father was Mr. Wonderful, and our whole entire family functioned around him. And when he died, our family fell totally apart. Dependency is a powerful thing. And that's why it's good to be able to look within your own self. Look at your own history. One of the things I found to be helpful in doing this is if you have any objects or things that connect you back to your childhood. I know when my mother died, I was extremely surprised to find all kinds of things connected to my childhood in my mother's dresser. I have one of my little booties when I was a kid. It's all worn out on one side. It's just totally amazing. I have the toe tag they had on me when I was born. See, now they put it on you when you die, a toe tag. But now we actually put one on you when you were born. They didn't have the bands like they have today. So things are a lot different. So she saved that. She saved everything. Now she saved my old flannel shirt, which my wife got made into a doll for me later on in life. So it's interesting how we begin to experience things in different directions as we're growing up. And that's why it's so important to be able to do this. Now, what are you going to do with these notepads, with all these things? I'll show you. One of the techniques I've learned, and I'm going to share it with you because it's so powerful and it does work. It's a journaling technique. And I know I never totally understood this, but now I do. For example, when you do your family history in your negative notebook, make a list of all the negative persons, places, and things that affected you as a child. Make a list of all the negative persons, places, and things that affected you as a child. Then in the other notebook, positive notebook, make a list of all the positive persons, places, and things that affected you as a child. Now the amazing part, some people could be on both lists. I'll give you an example of how we do this. Again, I'll use the example of my mother. She was definitely on both my lists. My mother, basically, I had to give my little boy, deep down inside, a voice. I had to give my inner child permission to, for the first time, to express his feelings. And so what I did in my negative notebook, I wrote my mother a letter, getting all my negative feelings out of me. The letter doesn't have to make any sense, by the way, because you're just talking about feelings. It's almost like regurgitating all that stuff. I remember as a little boy, I never had a voice. I was told to be quiet. I never had a chance to express how I feel. And because I came out of that background, when I was 14 years old, my mother decided, I was the only child, that guess what? You're going to be the family priest. Now, thank God they don't do that anymore. But back then, it was normal. Where Camden County College is right now, basically used to be the connection to the retreat house. Now everything's changed. It's totally amazing. We have to learn this and we have to deal with it. So what I recommend that you do, let's take my mom. I give my inner child permission to write this letter to my mother, getting rid of all my negative feelings. Now what I'm doing is using the voice of my little boy. Then I go to the positive notebook and I now develop a process, we call about this in self-parenting, where the adult in me is going to thank the inner child for expressing his feelings and then help that little child to learn good, healthy, positive lessons from the experiences that child went through? How do I take the stuff that was negative and how do I translate it over into positive lessons so I can learn from every one of the experiences? And I realized in my own journey, in my own life, I realized that being able to finally make peace with my mother, I was able to, in doing this work, my little boy was finally able to forgive her for putting me away when I was a child. But I realized today, it takes part of a process to write this, because I want to be able to write a letter helping my little boy to go through a healing process, to be able to release and be able to let go. So what I'm doing is, I'm actually looking at my inner child, my inner child root, and what positive lessons can I learn from it. A good example of this, growing up as a kid, I always had a fear of God. God was drilled into us. As an adult, I can help my little boy to begin to develop a God of love, a God of peace, a God of serenity, to build a different relationship. I can learn things in a different way. And that's why it's so important that each and every one of us are able to do this work and stay in touch with this work. Now, I share this with you because what you're going to do after you write some letters, normally you're writing a letter, the negative letter, then a positive letter, do the releasing. Then what you do is you take the negative letter and you either talk to your sponsor, somebody you feel comfortable with, and you read it to them, get your feelings out. And then share the positive letter with them. But after you share the negative letter, what you do is you tear it up. We tell people, if you want to, say a prayer and give it to God in the God box. Let it go. It's a powerful healing process that will take place just by letting it go. But again, it doesn't make any difference what you believe. It's important for me to do this writing because it helps me to identify my own personal needs. It helps me to identify where I'm supposed to go with these needs. Now, I learned the most important piece of putting it in the God box is the releasing of it. So what you're going to learn is, over a period of time, as we do these letters, basically the negative book's going to get smaller, the positive book will stay whole. Now, what I tell people to do is do this work, and when their God box starts to get a little bit full, bring it to us here at Starting Point. In the back of Starting Point, we have a place called our Recovery Cemetery. It's a piece of land. We have you bring it here, we dig a nice deep hole, and then we basically take everything and we put it onto one of the, I have a small habishi back there. You can put it in there, we can burn it. As we burn it, we take the ashes out, we bury the ashes, and do a funeral service to say goodbye to them. So what we're talking about is, I want to start working on healing this little kid that's inside of me. And there are many areas in my own life. Because one of the things we do when we ran our group process, it was done for me and I did it for a lot of people when we did the group process, is we do something called family sculpting. And I'll show this to you tomorrow, next week, when we do the inner child work. We actually sculpt a vision of your family, what your family looked like. Then we teach you how to re-sculpt it into something positive. I guess what I'm really trying to say is that every negative has a positive. So I want to be able to identify my patterns, my behaviors, the things that occurred, the traumas, and be able to heal and learn from them. For they are my greatest teacher. And we don't realize this, but so many of us have been through so much. We have many experiences and different types of things we've gone through. And that's why it's important to do this healing process, to help us to be able to see life differently. So this preparation work means, and one of the reasons why I want you to have a photograph of yourself is because I'll do a meditation, two meditations tomorrow, where I want you to be able to look at that photograph of yourself as a little child, truly get to know it. What I recommend, if you want to do it, is get a little frame for the photograph. You can put it next to your bed. And this, being able to say goodbye. I have a beautiful photograph of me as a little boy when I was about 5 years old. Of course, in the 40s, when you're 5 years old, they didn't have cameras like today. You actually posed for a photograph. And basically, things were because they were different. Some of the older people painted some of the statues. It's just being able to connect and learn and realize, even with the anger towards my mother, I realize now my mother gave me a beautiful gift. The gift of my addiction even is a gift because it brought me recovery. Something good comes from everything. My mother even putting me away at age 14 was really a gift. Because if I had stayed home, I'd probably still be mama's little boy. So it forced me to grow up. It forced me to stand on my own 2 feet. It forced me to begin to look at things differently. There's a process in all of this, and it works. That's why it's so important for us just to be able to identify it and be able to work through it. So good luck with your 7 questions. Question number 7, I forgot to mention. How did your childhood affect your relationships in your life? We do an inventory of your relationships and take a look at how did my childhood history affect my relationships? I know in my own life, I don't know how to have a relationship with anybody. I was taught just to stay away from everybody. I especially was never taught how to have a healthy relationship with a female. It took me a long time to work on that one. See, again, when you don't have good role models to show you where to go, and lead you along the way, people said to me, did you ever have the talk? I says, nah. Nobody did any of that stuff back then. How did you learn? You learn from the street, like everybody else. But it took time. It took an effort. And that's the most important thing that needs to be here. So today, when we share this with ourselves and get ourselves ready for next week, I want to offer a prayer to help us to have a guide and strength to be with us as we go through this process and learn these things. So we take a moment and let us pray. God, we come before you in prayer. We ask the God of our understanding, our divine presence, to be our guide and be our strength. We ask that you show us the way, to give us the strength to heal, to learn, to grow from all the experiences and things that have occurred in our life. Teach us to love ourselves, to celebrate who we are, to experience the gift of who we are. And one of the things we learn is to allow the higher power to simply be there and help us on our journey to become closer to you in all that we do. We ask that God will bless and guide us, help us to look within, to be able to go through healing, to go through growth, and to learn that each one of us is on the journey back to you. So we pray and we ask for guidance, we ask for direction, and we ask for it in your name. Amen.